And that is when he saw it. The most hideous creature he had ever seen.
The woman dissolves into a murder of crows and vanishes into the night.
Oh my God.
Right? Talon-like claws can puncture into your chest. They're eating your soul.
But we're here today for our third part of the Appalachia series.
Best topic, cryptids.
Cryptids.
Hi.
What's up?
This is Two Girls, One Ghost.
Two girls, one ghost. And we are your ghostesses. That is Corinne.
Hello.
I am Sabrina. And we are approaching the spring equinox.
Yes, we are. To tell us.
Which we can celebrate. Even if you're a baby witch like us, you can celebrate. If you're practicing Wiccan, you might celebrate Ostara, which is like Easter. Literally, the Catholic religion just ripped off Ostara. So I wanted to spread my witchy class knowledge, which I have been doing. So it's once a month for 6 hours on a Sunday. So Ash and I were at the last one and we learned all about the spring equinox. And
it's so wild that it's 6 hours long. I feel like I would not be able to digest
it's wild.
anything.
We also make crafts. We like planted.
that's fun.
We planted little seeds.
That you got to take home?
Yeah. And
what did you
painted
plant?
Pots. I did wildflowers.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So March 20th, 2025 is the spring equinox and it changes. I think it's between the 19th and 21st every year. It varies, but it is a time of renewal, rebirth, and new beginnings. It symbolizes the transition from darkness to light. And it's a time when nature begins to bloom again. And I also thought this was like the perfect time to record this episode because the last 2 days have been so nice, like the warmest weather in so long.
It's going to be in the 50s or 60s in a few days.
All of the snow is melting.
Yeah. You don't have to balance on a sheet of ice to get to my front
I don't have to
anymore.
ice skate here anymore. Yeah. And in the Wiccan practices, the spring equinox marks the celebration of Ostara, which is Ostara. Very similar to Easter. I wrote, holy shit on a goose. Catholicism literally ripped it off and inserted Jesus.
Yeah, well, we already knew that.
We did. Traditional pagans would celebrate with the exchanging of eggs and gifts, leaving offerings to the goddess of spring.
Oh, so Easter eggs.
That literally look like Easter baskets today.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought the Easter Bunny created those.
Believe it or not, no. Okay, so there are
pagan witches did.
Yes, Ostara did. So there are two goddesses that are traditionally celebrated or given offerings during the spring equinox or Ostara. One of them is Ostara, who is the goddess of spring. Mm-hmm. And she is often depicted with her companion hare because in the lore and the legend of Ostara, she found a bird that was really badly wounded. And in order to help heal the bird, she briefly turned it into a hare, like a rabbit.
Gosh, yeah.
But this rabbit still had the ability to lay eggs. And as a thank you to Ostara, every time it laid an egg, it would give them to Ostara as a gift.
So this is literally just a combination of Ostara and her being and her beliefs. And
exactly.
All her magic.
All her magic.
Wow.
So you can gift eggs and like chocolate and traditional Easter gifts to Ostara on your altar or wherever you do your practices. And you can call upon her when in need of abundance or during fertility rituals. So
I also really like that name, Ostara.
Ostara, yeah. I know. And then the goddess Persephone, which is the Greek goddess, is another goddess celebrated during the spring equinox. And if you remember any of Greek mythology, which I needed a refresher, but I had like some knowledge. So Persephone is the daughter of Demeter and Hades stole her, like ripped her away from Earth because he wanted her to be his wife. And so when he
happened a lot in Greek mythology.
Yes. So he took her down to the underworld and Demeter, Persephone's mother, was just devastated, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. And she fell into a depression, which literally controlled the weather on Earth. And it turned into a dark, bleak, cold winter, her depression. Eventually, over time, Zeus helped negotiate with Hades that Persephone could spend half of the year on the upper world, as they call it, and half of the year on the underworld. So now we have fall and winter, which is the time that Persephone is in the underworld, where Demeter is upset and like everything's dying because Demeter is so sad. But the moment that she returns, which is spring, the spring equinox, the world starts to bloom again and blossom and grow.
That's really beautiful.
But it's also a really good time for new beginnings. And I think that's what it all symbolizes. So if you want to plant a new idea, or if you want to plant flowers, spring equinox is the time to do that.
Okay, I have a packet of wildflowers that was given to my family from the vet when Wrinkles passed in 2012. And I was meaning to plant it. My mom gave them to me and she was like, who knows if these will bloom? Like these seeds are years and years and years old and dried out and weren't like preserved or kept in any sort of condition.
You don't have a seed bank?
No. Underground bunker doesn't have the seed bank quite yet. I'm working on it. But I do wonder maybe if like, since this seems like such a magical time and it's all about reborn, regrowth, like that
we
whole
should
vibe.
Do that.
This is the time to plant those seeds, because it seems like if ever there was some magical intervention that makes Wrinkles wildflowers grow, it would be on this date.
You can have like a Wrinkles plant bed.
Oh, I'm going to.
I love this. So yeah, this is the time to do it. Start new projects. If you want to celebrate in if you're baby witch like we are, going outside, going on walks and picking flowers if you're allowed, and thanking the flowers for their gift to you and bringing them home and having a bouquet is a good way to celebrate. It's also just a very powerful time in the year to set intentions, to leave things behind. You can like go out in the woods and bury the old and then to the universe set the new.
Huh?
Yeah. And then...
But like don't bury trash.
Exactly. No, it's like the energy of negative ideas.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
That's what this meant.
No littering, please. But yeah, that's the spring equinox.
I love that so much.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
And it's so easy to celebrate.
This is what I like, is that now that we're actually learning these things and you're going and you're taking the classes and sharing these things with us, and we have so many people sharing these things. I feel like for years we were so intimidated by the idea of calling ourselves witches or trying to explore, because it is such an expansive practice and it can be so broad, but there's so much accessibility.
So much. And I feel like we were already doing a lot of it, but we just didn't understand, or we weren't calling
when to do it.
And we weren't calling to name like the reason why we were doing it. Like we weren't celebrating specifically an equinox or a lunar eclipse or anything.
Yeah. And not that there was anything wrong with that, but this is just the times that can enhance what we were already trying to do.
Yes.
Which is really lovely.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
So set your intentions, start anew, rebirth, get pregnant. I don't know. Do you.
New year, do you. Not me. Not this year. Watch me name my daughter Ostara. I like that name a lot.
You're welcome. From the Wiccans, from the Pagans, many generations.
I'm going to change Noah's name to Jesus. So it'll be Jesus and Ostara, but they can battle it out.
Oh no, we'll be so confused.
I know.
I thought my name was Noah. We also have a new book of the Two Girls, One Ghost Patreon book club.
It is good.
You've already started it?
Yes. Can you believe it?
I'm shocked.
Normally, I am 24 hours before book club begins. I go on Audible and I listen at 3 times speed. I have started this because it has been recommended by so many people that I was like, okay, I'm done. And also the plot of it is so my vibe. It's like, you know, they're in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. There's a summer camp. A camper goes missing. Mystery.
We love it. So it's called The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. And we will be discussing it on Patreon on April 20-something. Join our Patreon to find out more.
Yeah. And if you're someone who isn't sure about if you like reading or not, I will say so many books are the types of books where you're like kind of waiting 100 pages for it to pick up or 50 pages to pick up. Like page 3, you're in it.
You're hooked.
So this is a good one to kind of restart your reading journey if you've been looking to pick up more books and haven't felt motivated.
And even if you don't want to read the book and you just want to come hang out with us, it's we usually do like an hour book club, and it's on a Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And
all mics unmuted on Zoom. We all just collectively hang.
Just hang, chat books, and then come up with like weird ideas. We call ourselves the literary vampires, and I think it's the best. Shout out to Rachel who came up with that in our last book club, but amazing. But we're here today for our third part of the Appalachia series.
Oh yeah. Best topic. Cryptids. And there are plenty. It is a very plentiful
many.
But and also, I guess what we've repeated over the last 2 episodes is that Appalachia is a huge region. It spans many states. 14 states on the east coast of America. And it ventures outside of America too. And there is just such a rich history there. There's a lot of culture, varying cultures there. And there's also
a lot of cults.
Lots of cults, maybe cannibals.
We don't know.
man-eating beasts in the woods. But yeah, there's just a lot of superstitions, a lot of lore, a lot of like weird, is this just a lore or is this a cryptid? And then there's very much like, oh my God, people are surviving these things today and chronicling them constantly online. And that is basically the reason why the rules of the Appalachia are, if you see something, no, you didn't. If you hear something, no, you didn't. Because these cryptids are alive. They're living in the Appalachia. And if you don't know how to play by the rules,
get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Don't even try. Is yours scary?
No, not really.
Okay.
Is yours?
No.
Wow. You wake to the sound of wind battering the walls of the cabin. Though when you went to sleep, the night had been still. The fire in the hearth is no more than glowing embers now, casting long, skeletal shadows along the walls. But something is wrong. You can feel it. There's a heavy presence pressing down on your chest, as if an unseen hand is reaching into you, searching, pulling. And then you hear it. A rasping breath. A whispering voice. Ragged and dry. It circles you, though you see nothing. And your heart pounds as you force yourself upright, your breath coming in short, sharp gasps. You know the stories. Your grandmother and the elders have warned you, but you never really truly believed them until now. The Raven Mocker, a shape-shifting witch that preys on the sick and dying. But you are not sick. You are not dying, are you? The room feels colder now. The embers in the fireplace flicker and die, leaving you suffocating in darkness. And then a sound, low and guttural, like a crow gurgling through its own death. Your eyes dart to the far corner, where something stirs. A shadow unfurls, too long, too thin, its joints cracking as it straightens its body. The stench of decay rolls over you, and your stomach is now in knots. And then you see them, the eyes, red as fresh blood, glowing in the darkness. And they fix on you, hungry. The shadow moves closer. The air grows thick. Your limbs are now sluggish. You try to speak, to pray, but the words lodge in your throat. The creature lets out a sound, a cruel, rasping mockery of a human laugh. And then it lunges. Pain lances through you, though no hand touches your flesh. It is inside of you. It is sinking its sharp, bony, long, talon-like hands into you, deeper through your muscle, into your bone. A terrible pressure builds behind your ribs, a pulling sensation as if your very soul is about to be ripped from your body. The weight, the pain, it's all just so unbearable. But then suddenly it stops, and you hear the chants, an echo through the night, an old familiar voice rising in song. It's your grandmother. The pressure lifts, the red eyes flicker, the shape recoils, and then it is gone. You collapse onto the floor. You're gasping for breath. You're trembling. And outside, carried by the wind, you hear it. A single mocking.
I have a bone to pick with you.
What?
You said yours is not scary. How is this not scary? I think your tolerance has gone up.
Okay, it must have been. Well, because it's a fake scenario that I wrote.
I know, but terrifying.
Okay.
Based on the lore of this creature.
Yeah, I guess this creature is actually, I don't know what I was saying. This is one of the most terrifying Cherokee cryptids.
Yeah, if you encountered this, are you fucking kidding me?
No, it's very feared. I recant my previous statement.
Okay.
So the Cherokee Nation of the Appalachians, they have long guarded the secrets of the mountains. They have whispered warnings of creatures that lurk in the darkness, spirits so terrifying that they make even the bravest hesitate before stepping onto the misty foothills. We talked about the Cherokee a lot in the previous 2 episodes.
Sure did.
And they really are the champions of this area. And a lot of the traditions, a lot of the cryptids, the spirits, a lot of those beliefs stemmed from the Cherokee Nation. And a lot of it was oral tradition to tell over generations and generations. And it still very much is a part of the Appalachia today.
This, I feel like we've heard about. Yeah. Where there are a lot of cryptids and creatures in the Appalachias that are known and talked about, but are more small town.
Yeah. Or even where it's like, you know, like the melon heads or the moon-eyed people, like things like that, where you're like, okay, it's kind of like a weird science experiment, or is that aliens? Or like, where did this come from? Where it might feel potentially more modern, but with an attempt at feeling ancient.
Right.
Whereas
this has deep roots.
Yeah, these things existed before the Cherokee Nation was here. They
learned
to
about
live
it
with it.
Yes.
So these are not just old stories. They are sacred truths passed down through generations. And among the horrors that haunt their lore, one is feared more than the rest. Kalanu Ahaliski, meaning the one that robs a dying man of life, also known as the Raven Mocker.
It's interesting that it's specifically someone who's already dying.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because it doesn't feel like, we're all technically dying. And that kind of feels like the only criteria for the Raven Mocker, because it's not like the people are ill that are preyed upon.
So yes, we must be living in order to die, and they prey upon the living and take away their lives so that they die. Okay.
Right. So the Raven Mocker, Kalanu Ihaliski in Cherokee, is a shape-shifting witch, a predator of the weak, and the Raven Mocker is no ordinary phantom. It does not merely take lives, it devours the essence of the dying. So I guess it does go for people who are a bit weaker at the time.
Easier prey, yeah.
Yeah. It consumes their final breath to stretch on its own existence. And what's really interesting is it's not just like it takes your soul and it's like, I'm alive. It takes the final years that you would have had and tacks that on to its life. So it's almost like you would have known how long you would have lived.
Based on how many years it takes.
Yeah. So if it takes 17 years, you would have lived another 17 years.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It does remind me a bit of the Manananggal, like especially in the way that it creeps into your sleeping bed. And
right.
The Manananggal takes children and guts, but similar.
And slurps your soul out.
Yeah, with its
where
long
this one has a long bony
tongue.
finger. All just long
limbs, long anything is unsettling.
Yeah, it feels unnatural.
Long toes.
Too long toes.
Too long finger toes, as I call them. I have them.
So the Cherokee believe that when someone is near... I'm just glazing by that. So the Cherokee believe that when someone is near death, the Raven Mocker will circle unseen, waiting to strike. Unlike other spirits, the Raven Mocker does not seek revenge or torment for pleasure. Instead, it is specifically trying to gain access to the years that dying person had left to preserve its own life. It kind of reminds me of in Harry Potter when the unicorn blood is drank. You know, it's like strictly it's not for like the sport of killing unicorns. It's for like preservation of life.
Right.
So this is why those who live unnaturally long lives are sometimes suspected of being Raven Mockers in disguise. Because it's like, well, how did you last so long? How are you 100 years old? You must be a Raven Mocker, because I can't believe one hasn't come for your soul yet.
Right.
They say the arrival of a Raven Mocker is marked by strange sounds. So usually there's an eerie wind that will rise from nowhere, a rustle of unseen wings, and most chilling of all, this rasping, unnatural breath.
Oh, which makes me think that the Raven Mocker is closer to its last years. And so it needs to, it's like the legend of a witch stealing the soul of a young maiden.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like they don't go seeking out when they're in their prime years. Right. It's when they really need it.
They're
which
like,
is
shit, I
like
forgot.
A redeeming quality.
It's like they're getting their Botox. Right. They forgot about it because they had gotten it. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, my wrinkles are back. I need to go.
I need to go refuel.
Yeah.
Those unfortunate enough to witness a Raven Mocker describe it as being shrouded in darkness, its form shifting between human and bird, with eyes glowing and this unnatural fire behind the eyes that pierced your soul. So
I'm wearing a fiery eye shirt. How appropriate.
Serendipitous. Yeah. They have talon-like hands, so very raven-like again, or crow-like. And
I did light up our crow for this episode. Yeah.
And your fingers are quite elongated. And it's not just for aesthetics or to be creepy. It is literally so that their long fingers, talon-like claws, can puncture into your chest, crack through bone and muscle, and lasso your soul around their finger and rip it out. They're eating your soul. It moves with unnatural speed. It's invisible unless it wants to be seen, which is also terrifying.
That is terrifying.
So it's just you hear the wind and the
right. And then there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm. And those it touches says that they feel their life force being pulled from them. One of the most well-known tales amongst the Cherokee tells of an elder who recognized the signs of a Raven Mocker's presence. He summoned the strongest of medicine men from his tribe. Mm-hmm. And the medicine men, they all surrounded this dying person's home, chanting prayers and burning sacred herbs. And as the night stretched on, a terrible screech rang through the forest, and those present saw a dark shadow streak across the sky, retreating. So basically, there is a way to survive this thing where it's like
power in numbers.
Power in numbers and prayer and positive intentions and I guess just like trying to put that positive energy into the person who's dying or around them to protect them.
I'm curious if, because I know with the Cherokees, there's a lot of like offerings and respecting the spirits and the nature that's there. Like, are there practices that they do to kind of appease the Raven Mocker?
That's an interesting question. I didn't read of anything, but it's an interesting question because you would think like, is there a ritual that could exist where like there's an offering that sustains the Raven Mocker's life enough that they aren't seeking out a human? So in this scenario, the men did say that they saw the glowing red eyes as well, watching from the tree line. So it's like this thing is hunting, but it's not as beastly to the point where it's just going to plow down an entire town or group of men to get to what it wants. It's hunting for a purpose.
Again. And it seems like it's picking one specific individual.
Yes.
And you can come together to protect that person.
Right. Which is also interesting. So then it like makes me question the Raven Mockers' morals. Like, do they really want to do this? Or is this like an Avatar situation where they're in their own little language and they're rasping breath, being like, thank you for giving me life to sustain. You know, like they don't view us as the way that we view ourselves. Like we're food.
It's a circle of life.
Yeah.
Survival.
Yeah. So they don't want to do it.
They have to.
How weird that for the past few episodes, we're really trying to excuse the behavior of the Appalachia.
Honestly, it's like we as humans have been doing this for forever where we leech, we are greedy, we're
by definition parasites.
We're parasites. And for some reason, we're like, yeah, that's totally fine because we're humans. We're like the most advanced, we get away with it. But no. If we are allowed to do that, let's honor and respect the fact that other animals and creatures are doing it as well.
Yeah, it's scary to be hunted, but circle of life.
Yeah.
Another story tells of a young warrior who, while hunting in the mountains, he heard whispers carried by the wind. And so he followed the sound and he was like, oh, I wonder if there's someone nearby that might need help. Is there someone that I know? And he finds an old woman standing over this sick man and her mouth is moving, but it's making no sound. And as he approached, she suddenly turns, looks at him, and what appeared to be a woman starts to kind of shift into this inhuman form. And the warrior then draws his knife, but before he could act, the woman dissolves into a murder of crows.
Holy shit, that is so cool.
And vanishes into the night.
Oh my God.
Right? It's a shapeshifter, so it can really take on any form.
That's amazing.
Typically, it chooses birds, but it can be anything.
Wow.
The sick man survived, and when he awoke, he spoke of terrible dreams where something dark was trying to steal his final breath. The only defense against a Raven Mocker is the power of Cherokee medicine men and women, their chants and rituals, and this is really just the last chance that you have against the creature's grasp.
You have to try something.
If you don't have access to those people, sorry to you. You're gone.
You're dead.
You're dead. So Sabrina, in the book that you had bought for research,
it
also states that these rituals, the specific rituals that they use, include placing knives, scissors, or other sharp objects beneath the bed of a dying person, as the Raven Mocker is believed to fear these objects.
Oh.
And additionally, chanting sacred songs and prayers can help protect the soul of the departed. Which there was a lot about song in part 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like song and storytelling and music just in general is so important in the Appalachias.
Yeah.
Even if you're not dying, and well, we're all dying as we previously declared, and as fact, we should all just sleep with scissors under our bed.
I do. Many nights.
I believe it.
I have a panic button next to my bed too.
A life alert.
I do. I literally do.
A real life alert?
Well, like I have my my security system panic button.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Some say a spirit can be driven away by those who know the old ways of the Cherokee, but few have ever claimed to actually defeat one.
Because I feel like those people are dead.
Right.
So there's no story to be told.
Right. Like, how would you know that they were taken?
Yeah.
Unless there's another witness in the home that was like, oh, it suddenly got really extra windy and I was hearing weird stuff and I didn't really think much of it. And then their relative is dead in the morning.
Yeah.
It is said that when a Raven Mocker dies, its body is consumed by flames, leaving no trace behind. So there's literally no evidence of the Raven Mocker. You can't just happen upon their carcass. There's no way to prove the Raven Mocker's existence.
Whoa.
Postmortem.
But I'm curious if I'm thinking of like a phoenix rising from the ashes, right? So it will burn into ashes. But if you were in the nearby woods, would you see a fire and be like, oh, there's another group of people camping? Or how long does it burn?
I'm not sure. And then also like when its life ends, is that just because it wasn't able to sustain another life? Or is there truly like, okay, when they reach 3,000 years or something, it's a natural point where any life it doesn't do enough for them.
Interesting.
And then how do they procreate? I don't know. I have good questions about these things.
Or is it like, did they used to be human and then they returned into this? Unanswered questions.
We don't know.
Still fascinating.
So while the Raven Mocker is a feared, malevolent force, it also serves as a guardian to Cherokee traditions and values. It embodies the duality of life and death, good and evil, reminding the Cherokee people of the spiritual world's power and the importance of living a virtuous life.
Yep.
And in Cherokee culture, death is not an end, but it's this transition period.
Yeah.
So the legend of the Raven Mocker reinforces this belief. It highlights the enduring connection between the living and the spirit world. And if you're a Bigfoot hunter, apparently the Raven Mocker is a reminder that Bigfoot is real.
What do you mean?
In the Appalachia. Okay, this is where I was like, what the fuck? A shape-shifting Bigfoot equals Raven Mocker, essentially. So people believe that the Raven Mocker, some people believe, I'll say, I don't know that the Cherokee believe this, but some people believe that the Raven Mocker is actually a Bigfoot of sorts, that this big, giant, black-furred, shape-shifting beast can be this like wispy, shape-shifting, red-eyed Raven Mocker.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure where this belief started, but what I found online was Mounted Monsters, Bigfoot Edition. That's the TV show. Season 2, episode 13.
Oh my gosh.
Bigfoot of Lee County, Raven Mocker. So I watched not all of it, but half of it.
Yeah.
So the team heads to Lee County, Virginia, and they're in search for the Bigfoot Raven Mocker, which I was like, is this a different Raven Mocker? But no, it turns out they spoke about the Cherokee belief that there is a creature. So they're claiming that this is a Cherokee belief, which I'm not really sure because I couldn't actually find it anywhere else. But they're claiming that there's this Cherokee belief that this creature could enter the soul of a raven and see through its eyes. And right before it would kill its victims, it would call out like a raven. And they spoke about how some of the elder relatives and elders in the area said that hearing a raven meant death, which was interesting because in part 1, you gave a list of like all the things that ravens or seeing crows meant.
Yeah.
And if you see one crow, it meant bad news is coming your way. So death would certainly be bad news. But in this episode, there were quite a few witnesses that came forward to talk about their sightings. And these are like modern witnesses. Like these are people that are alive.
Where is this? Lee County?
Lee County, Virginia.
Virginia. Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things that was said by one of the witnesses is the potential connection between a Bigfoot and a Raven Mocker. There's this guy that was in the woods and he found Bigfoot prints. But alongside the Bigfoot prints, or like maybe in the Bigfoot prints, were also a woman's prints. And the Raven Mocker is often shapeshifting into a woman. And so this was the idea that like,
interesting,
maybe not necessarily that it is exactly the Raven Mocker, but that Bigfoot can shapeshift into different forms and creatures. And our understanding of just a Bigfoot is incorrect.
Well, I would agree that our understanding of Bigfoot is misguided or just, we don't know. We don't have the answers. So
why not?
Or
well, apparently
is it
in Appalachia, the Bigfoots could also be Raven Mockers.
It's you and Bigfoot. And you know how like usually like as with the little foot, you step on top of the Bigfoot. Yeah. But you're like, hey, you step on my feet and I'll walk us.
Yeah. Or we're just like foot by foot, like just always have to be touching, like
always
in step.
Touching. Yeah.
Physical touches, me and Bigfoot self-language. Yeah. So who knows? But the next time you find yourself alone at night in the Appalachia, do listen carefully. The wind begins to rise without any reason. If you hear some hushed voices, if you hear rasping breath too close to your ear, know that the Raven Mocker may be near and that your life is certainly at risk.
That's scary.
It is.
That's scary.
I feel like the Bigfoot part is interesting to me, but it also makes me mad because then I'm like, if this is real and true, that this thing that feels so different from descriptions of Bigfoot could also be a Bigfoot, it makes me think, well, then is everything Bigfoot? But I'd much rather encounter a Bigfoot than a Raven Mocker.
Absolutely.
It's like a Dementor.
I mean, who's to say that they don't come and go from the same portals or dimensions, and that's just an entryway in Lee County? Who knows?
And we talked last week about the devil's parties that he throws. So perhaps
there's just
some confusion because Bigfoot and the Raven Mocker, sometimes they travel together. You know, Bigfoot walks the Raven Mocker home after a party.
Yeah.
They need a little extra help getting home because, you know,
The Raven Mocker had a little bit too much to drink.
They didn't have enough life. They had too much to drink. It just all went to their head.
You would think after 3,000 years they build up a tolerance, but they're still a lightweight.
No, yeah, there weren't enough poor unfortunate souls at this party. So,
I mean, I like the Raven Mocker in the sense that it's a very spooky story. Like I imagine sitting around a campfire late at night in Appalachia telling that story.
Right. Which is so scary.
Everyone would go to sleep terrified.
Well, and if you're camping too, of course the wind is going to pick up at some point.
And you're going to hear birds.
You're going to hear rustling and you're going to be like, is that the rasping sound of someone's voice? You know, someone's going to be snoring in the tent next door and you're like, oh my God, it's the Raven Mocker. If anyone's camping or hiking, do take this story with you.
And if you would like to end your evening around the campfire with something less scary, I'm going to tell you about the best cryptid. I have never felt so connected to something in my life. It's depressed. It scares people. It loves to spend time alone. And it cries a lot. And it hates its reflection.
Oh my God. This poor creature. Poor you.
Oh. But like I found it's like my kindred spirit. I'm like in love.
What is it called?
The Squonk.
The Squonk.
And its nickname is Pennsylvania's saddest creature, but I think it's the world's saddest cryptid.
Oh, poor guy or girl or thing.
Yeah, a lot of articles give it like a feminine, so they say her, but I don't know. The Squonk, they, them. The Squonk first made its debut. It presented itself to the world at the end.
While it was crying.
Always crying. At the end of the 19th century. And it was first spotted by lumberjacks in the Pennsylvania hemlock woods. So as the story goes, the Squonk spent many of their like early years moving from location to location. They tried living in the desert. They tried living in the swamps. And they were displaced kind of constantly.
Well, they need to do their astrocartography lines so that they can see where they could be happiest. Because clearly they're not really vibing with where they've been.
But no, I think they are happiest in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And so they found and made their way to the woods and the forestry of Pennsylvania. But
I love the migration of the Squonks.
I know. They've come a long way. Each time they had to move, they were displaced in some way. But finally, they found their way to the forests of Pennsylvania in the late 1800s. Beautiful, plenty of trees, so much space for them to be alone and to hide. And they felt good for a time. But then the forest began to disappear. It was slow. The trees were being cut down and entire forests were being demolished. I looked this up, but by the end of the 19th century, I think it was about 60% of Pennsylvania's woods and forests were gone.
I thought you were going to say 60% of the Squonks had been.
60% of the Squonk. Well, I mean,
the Squonk population was depleting.
It was depleting.
Wow, that's quite upsetting.
Because timber barons.
I am picturing them as the Lorax too. I'm picturing them as these like small little kind of troll-like beings.
You're picturing it great.
Am I?
Yeah.
Is this Squonk energy?
There will be photos in the YouTube, but I don't want to show you a photo until I get to the description of them because I don't want to taint your experience. Okay, so yeah, timber barons had basically chopped down all of Pennsylvania's trees. I looked it up, and ironworks furnaces required an acre of trees a day.
Okay, why?
I think it was like a vital part of making charcoal.
Well, increase your efficiency and figure out how to not use charcoal.
Right. And even the lumberjacks. So a lot of this story of the Squonks come from lumberjacks who, you know, they were making a living doing this work, but they were themselves seeing firsthand the way that this was being done irresponsibly, the devastation of the forests, the wastefulness of it.
So they are friends to Squonks.
And of the trees and of the woods. And then also, this is their livelihood, cutting down trees and working in the forests. If all of Pennsylvania's forests are gone or diminishing, their jobs are at risk.
Right.
They would live in lumber camps set up in the woods. They spent a lot of time with the trees and in the woods, and they were the first to see the Squonk. So there's no real first encounter. So I decided to take some creative liberties and create the first encounter.
Okay, I'm excited for this.
And I wanted to, with you, brainstorm some names to call our lumberjack, the star of the story. Should we go like Forrest Stump?
Oh, we're giving him like a lumberjack name?
Like a lumberjack name.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Forrest Stump or...
Like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, or Timber, like Timber.
I like that.
What else?
I like Timber.
Timber. Douglas Fairbanks. But let's see. What other trees are there?
Chestnut.
Chestnut. Sawyer, my log. We'll go Timber.
Timber.
It feels appropriate.
Timber.
Timber was a second-generation lumberjack. He grew up with stories from his father, Sawyer McLeod. For some reason, they have different last names.
Or becoming cryptids of their own.
Tim spent his life working in the Pennsylvania woods, and he'd inherited more than just his father's toe fingers and his father's unruly beard hair. I did put unruly beard hair, but I just added toe fingers because we talked about them earlier. He'd also inherited the rules of the woods. His father always told him that the forest was alive, and he swore once that when he was cutting down a tree, he heard it cry. And as he took a final whack with his axe, the tree came falling down with the most painful wail he'd ever heard.
Oh.
So Tim's father warned him to never wander off by himself and to always thank the trees for their sacrifice. Mm-hmm. When Tim turned 15, he followed in his father's footsteps and began his first job as a lumberjack. At the point of this story, Tim is now nearing 50. Eating 8,000 calories a day was a lot, and it was wearing on him. That's a stat. Like, lumberjacks would eat 8,000 calories a day to sustain the energy for their jobs.
I absolutely believe that, because when I was pregnant, I think I was easily taking down 3,500.
I'm sure.
Breastfeeding, probably 4,000.
I'm sure.
Truly.
Yeah.
Like a snack would be 1,000 calories.
But this was weighing on his body, and he was coming to a point where maybe his career would be coming to an end soon. But for the last 45 years, Timber never forgot the rules of his father. He never wandered off alone, and he always thanked the trees. He felt a profound love and connection to the forest, but he started to notice that something was changing. The forest he once knew as a spry 15-year-old boy were all but gone. So on this day, it was a long day of work. Tim joined his fellow lumberjacks around the fire, where they cajoled and commiserated about the day and life. And that is when another man, another lumberjack, Forrest Stump, told the others what he'd overheard. There's a rumor going around. We're not long for work out here. Our jobs are going to become less and less. I don't know where he's from.
It's funny because you're giving him the exact same accent that I give to the park ranger in Get Dressed Sasquatch, which is a book one of our listeners gifted.
That's
Noah.
So cute.
Yeah.
If there are no forests left, there will be no jobs either. And Timber had heard these rumors, but he felt it long before, because he had seen for 45 years the devastation firsthand. He knew he wasn't long for work any longer anyways, but he was struck with a really profound sadness, and he felt a tear drop from his eye down his cheek, settling into his beard. Not wanting his fellow men and women lumberjacks to see him, he dismissed himself. For a wee, he said. And without thinking, he broke the very first rule. He wandered off into the woods alone. He walked through what is now the graveyard of trees, where once life sprung up to the sky, now laid barren tree stumps, slowly decaying. That single tear had friends, and they started leaking from his tear ducts. He fell to his knees, sobbed for the land, sobbed for the trees. And that's when he heard it. Another cry. Not his, another's. And there's nothing like a mysterious sound coming from the woods to consume and swallow up your tears.
Yeah.
So he wiped his tears and looks around. Is anyone out there? The foreign sobs continued. And that is when he saw it. The most hideous creature he had ever seen. The Squonk.
No, Squonk, you're beautiful. Don't hate your own reflection.
Of course, he didn't have a name for it then, but it was a creature, pig-like, on all fours, covered in warts and moles. Its skin was loose and wrinkly, and it truly was sobbing, forming a pool of tears beneath it. Tim was startled, but also concerned, and despite his instinct to run, he wanted to know more, so he took a step closer to this creature, and it began crying more and more. And suddenly, it dissolved into a pile of its own tears. Tim was shaken. He ran back to camp and was like, I don't know what I just experienced. But the next night around the campfire, he decided to share his story, and he was surprised to learn that he was not the only lumberjack who had seen this creature.
They were all just keeping it quiet.
The Squonk had long been seen by the lumberjacks in Pennsylvania, and thus began the story and the legend told around campfires at night, forever ingrained in Pennsylvania history, the story of the Squonk. So it's not documented literally in history books, but there is a text written in 1910 called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumber Woods. And it was written by William T. Cox, who was a forester by trade. And he was the first to document the story of the Squonk as told through his time as a lumberjack and told by other fellow lumberjacks around the campfire.
Wow.
He wrote the following. The squonk is of a very retiring disposition, generally traveling about at twilight and dusk. Because of its misfitting skin, which is covered with warts and moles, it is always unhappy. Hunters who are good at tracking are able to follow the squonk by its tear-stained trail, for the animal weeps constantly.
Oh my God.
When cornered, an escape seems impossible, or when surprised and frightened, it may even dissolve into tears. It is probably the homeliest animal in the world, and it knows it.
This is so upsetting.
So here's one picture of the squonk.
Oh.
But my favorite picture of the squonk is actually a meme.
It does kind of look like a hog.
It does.
Like a wild hog.
This meme is maybe my favorite picture of the squonk.
Oh,
I
poor
know.
thing. You know what it looks like?
What's it look like?
It looks like that like a bacteria, like the
Poor
something
squonk.
bear. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I was thinking of a tardigrade, which is a microscopic animal. Looks like gummy bears, and they're called moss piglets or water bears as nicknames. And
what?
this is what it looks like.
Oh, it does look like that.
Well, I'll screenshot it and put it
But
in
I
the
kind of
thing.
love those because I love the squonk. So the appearance of the squonk has truly never changed, where I feel like a lot of cryptids like evolve and their habits change. The squonk is consistent. There are certain aspects that it has gotten more character development over the years. It is said that squonks are slower on moonlit nights because the light means that they're more likely to see their reflections in illuminated bodies of water, and they don't want to see their reflections, so they move slower or they stay still on those nights.
Mm.
One evolution of the squonk gave them 2 webbed feet, not all 4. And I think it's like one front and one back. So like, it's just like this poor thing. It's ashamed of its appearance and often hides and spends much of its time weeping. There's a legend of a hunter named J.P. Wentling who claimed to have tracked down the squonk following its trail of tears, and he captured it in a sack. And he threw the sack over his shoulder, and he's like wandering out of the woods with his prize all like high and mighty.
As the thing is weeping in the back.
But as he gets closer and closer to the outside of the forest, he notices his bag is a lot lighter. So he stops and he opens it, and all that is left, no squonk in sight, all that is left is the puddle of tears, because it literally evaporates into its own tears.
Which makes me so confused. Like, is that like its way of dying, that it just like dissolves into tears? Or does it just kind of poof? Is it kind of like a lizard that drops part of its tail when you pick him up?
Yeah.
And he just kind of
I almost
kind of
feel like
disguise itself and move and change particles. I guess.
I think he's like he can teleport through tears.
Oh, the little squonks.
If you cry enough, you can teleport. Gather your tears for teleportation. But
crying is good for you.
The legend that came from this story is that the squonk tears were mixed with the DNA of a Boston Terrier, and that is how pugs came about. Isn't that amazing?
This makes so much sense.
The squonk is more than just a legend. The squonk represents lessons that we can learn. The squonk represents the sadness specifically around the forest devastation.
Mm-hmm.
The squonk's ability to dissolve into tears when cornered can be seen as a metaphor for the way ecosystems collapse under humans' pressure or destruction. When threatened, the squonk disappears, leaving behind only a pool of tears, in the same way that when a habitat or forest is deforested and destroyed, the entire species can vanish, leaving only just traces of their existence.
Right.
But the squonk is also a reminder that it's okay to have flaws. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to cry. And that sometimes, you need to dissolve into a puddle of tears to release your pain and your insecurities. Usually we do feel better afterwards.
And that you don't have to stay somewhere that makes you unhappy.
Yes. No matter what insecurities you feel, you do belong and you do have a place. Like the squonk has stayed in the Pennsylvania forest. That's where it belongs and it lives there.
And there are other people out there that want to protect you, that want to help you, that want to champion you, that love you.
Exactly. And after the 19th century, when like the forestry in Pennsylvania was almost completely wiped out, there was a change and there was a shift and there was a call to action of people realizing the destruction that they had done. And granted, we have ruined a lot of our environment, but like trees have been planted since then and forestry has regrown in the way that the squonk has kind of persevered throughout time. And the squonk has been immortalized in many ways. There is a famous song by Genesis called Squonk. And then this is my favorite. There's a celebration every year in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, all about the squonk. It is called Squonkapalooza.
Oh my God. Wait, what do they do there? So they're like crying corners?
No, it's like a celebration of cryptids and specifically the squonk and his history. Squonkapalooza. And it's August 2nd, 2025 this year. It's an all-ages cryptid festival celebrating squonk and other creatures of Appalachian and Americana folklore and cryptozoology.
So great.
Squonkapalooza.
Squonkapalooza. But they do a lot of like pigs in a blanket and like other foods that are a little, squonk-like.
Yeah. But that's the squonk, my spirit animal.
Oh, these poor little creatures. I want to adopt one.
Right?
I'll make a bed for you in my backyard.
We'll cover all the mirrors.
Yeah. I don't have anything in my shed. Do you want to live there?
But I'll remind you how beautiful you are. I love the squonk.
Me too.
That's the story of the squonk.
I can't believe we've never heard of a squonk before.
Ever.
We can never cover cryptids again. This is the best one.
Right?
I'm with you.
It's amazing. Wow. I was so thrilled to find the squonk. I think the squonk found me.
You guys are two peas in a pod.
Oh, man.
Two squonks in the woods.
Two squonks in the woods. You and Bigfoot are off in the woods and I'll be with Squonk in Pennsylvania.
Me and Bigfoot are just like walking hand in hand and we just hear weeping. And we're like, oh, don't worry.
There
it's
they
just
are.
Sabrina and the squonk.
Yeah. But those are two of so many cryptids in the Appalachian region. Many. We'll have to revisit it again because there are so many. There are some that are absolutely terrifying that I think Spearfinger, maybe that's the one that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
There's like, I'm trying to remember from the book, but like Dover Demon, Jersey Devil, Bigfoot, the Apple Devil. Like there's so many and there's so many iterations. And I feel like if you were to study every single one, maybe they just have different names based on the region that they are seen in, but they might be interconnected. Maybe they have parties down in the tunnels, the cave system of the Appalachians.
Yeah. How far do they travel?
Right.
I wonder too if cryptids have like a travel bucket list too. Like if up in Maine, some of the cryptids up there that they're just like, oh, we always hear about the squonks. Like, should we go to squonk territory and hang out with the squonks?
Right. Or like the squonks are like, hey, we're going to have a crying party. Like everyone come cry with us.
Yeah.
It's therapy.
They host a retreat in Pennsylvania. It's during the Spring Equinox.
Yes. This is kismet. It's all coming together.
You just can let it all out, bury all the bad, and
plant some trees in Pennsylvania.
Right.
To
start
spring
fresh.
New life.
This makes so much sense.
It's,
I understand why we're doing this. Squonks.
You're on to something.
Okay, but we have emails from all of you who have encountered cryptids and odd things along the Appalachia and general cryptid stories. All right, so this is called Appalachia lore or something.
Something.
Hi, I have lived in and out of Appalachia for my whole life, from the hills of Tennessee to western North Carolina and into the mountains of Virginia. Now I am currently a student at West Virginia University, living in the beautiful state of West Virginia. I've had plenty of creepy, weird things occur, but I think that this is one that takes the cake. This occurred about 2 years ago, 2 days before New Year's. My boyfriend at the time lived in a small place in West Virginia, and I currently live in Central Virginia. So the quickest way was to drive over the mountains through the Monongahela National Park and Forest.
Okay.
That's what we're going to call it. It's a beautiful place. Jamie, I hope you keep trying to pronounce it. It's a beautiful place, but at the time, I'd only seen this part during the day. But this time was different. I unfortunately had work, and the earliest that I could get off was 5 p.m. From his house to mine, it was a 4 to 5 hour drive. So I was driving during the night.
Yep.
I was all alone, and I was just simply creeped out, so my anxiety was already through the roof. My drive went well. I stopped at a small town in the mountains in Virginia before I crossed over the state line to West Virginia. It was dark. It was around 8 p.m. I was going down a windy road. It was just me. I hadn't seen another car in almost an hour. I had just went around a curve when finally I got to the straight portion and I saw a deer dead on the side of the road. Okay, it's literally normal here. But what I saw next horrified me. There was a tall black figure with glowing eyes. I honestly couldn't tell what color because I had my brights on and the dashboard was really bright. So I slowed down thinking that this was a bear. I was super wrong. As I slowly went by it, I realized this was not a bear. It was tall. I want to say maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. It was taller than the car that I was driving in, which was my dad's F-150 with a 2-inch lift on it. I was horrified. It looked at me and it started walking towards me when I was trying to go around the deer carcass. I was so creeped out. I was horrified. I just simply sped off. I had no cell service. I was too terrified to even think about taking a picture. I slowed down once I sped off, trying to collect myself. And in my mind, I was going through all of the Appalachian lore things and things I'd known. And at first, I thought maybe it was my music. But then I started to hear something being thrown. I looked at my rear view to see a log being thrown. I sped off again because I was so scared, but also I couldn't shake the fact that my dad would kill me if there was any damage to the truck. So I finally got to my boyfriend's house with no issues after that. And when I got there, his mom came to greet me at the door. As my boyfriend was still at work, I said nothing. And later that night, while my boyfriend was asleep next to me, I woke up. I looked at my GPS of my journey and was able to pinpoint exactly where I had been, where I'd had that experience. Thanks to Life 360, you were useful for once. I realized I was in the national park, and I began going down the rabbit hole of experiences that others have had in that area and all of the lore that surrounded that place. I went back about 3 days later with no issues in that exact same spot, but this time it was during the day, and there were more cars on the road, and I could see. When I drove back through that exact same spot, there was nothing suspicious. The deer had been removed, and I could not find any piece of wood or anything that had been thrown at my car. Nothing. So I arrived back home and still told nobody.
Oh my gosh.
I'm now 22 and about to graduate college. I will always love the state of West Virginia, the waterfalls, the hikes, the places to see, and the people. This will always be home to me, but I will still never forget the experience I had in the Monongahela National Park. To this day, I still watch videos about the park and the creepy West Virginia lore, but I still cannot wrap my head around the fact that it actually occurred to me. But I think I've settled that this is most likely Bigfoot. I'm not really sure. I always thought the lore was really interesting, but I never really thought that I would experience anything firsthand. And since this experience, I've had some other weird experiences, but this is the one that I will never, ever forget. I've still barely told anyone. When I do tell people, most laugh at me. And the only people that have believed me are some of my West Virginia native friends. And now my current fiance. My interest will still be in all of the lore, but in the meantime, I'm going to take a break from Appalachia.
Fair.
Thank you for listening to my story. I promise I'm not crazy. This shit happened. Becca, we beyond believe you.
And the story I'm about to read is very similar.
Whoa. Okay, I'm also in agreement with Becca that this does sound like a Bigfoot thing, especially the throwing of rocks. That's like one of the classic tells of a Bigfoot. And the fact that it can close so much distance so quickly. There's a lot of talk about Bigfoot being this sort of interdimensional being, and it can kind of like hop through portals, and it doesn't necessarily have to chase you on its own two giant feet. So it makes sense that like, you know, Becca sped off, kept driving, then slowed down, and then was...
But it's also like, again, like there are so many different creatures in the Appalachians, but it does have, you know, flesh pedestrian type energy or a dogman, a not deer, so many things, vampire.
It's also crazy because it's like in Appalachia, there's so many stories that are, I think, associated with Bigfoot or some of these other cryptids that can be kind of similar, where there's stories of, you know, deer being hung in the, almost like as a feast, like hung up in the woods, in the middle of the woods. People will encounter this like deer carcass where the head is like clean off and stuff like that. So deer do seem to be a part of potentially the diet of Bigfoot or some of the similar creatures.
Yes. The story does not take place in the same areas, but it does take place in Appalachia in Maryland. And the creature sounds so similar that I'm like,
wow. Okay, Becca, here we go.
Yeah. Becca, you're not alone. This is from our listener, Misty, and it's called Encounter. Hello. I recently found your channel, so I thought I would drop by and share a couple instances. I live in the mountains in Maryland, and yes, it is the Appalachian mountain range. I do not often recount this story because I get looked at as if I'm crazy or trying to pull a prank. My town is small, so it's not uncommon to travel a bit and go to live events or to go away to school. So traveling to hang out with friends is common. One evening, after hanging with friends, it was very late, around 3 a.m, and I was driving home alone, and it was quiet and peaceful. It was not a very high traffic road, and it had been there since before the highway was built. I had my music on low and my window slightly lowered for crisp breeze as it was late September and a clear night. Suddenly, the radio began to static, which is strange because it was not on the radio. My Bluetooth was playing, listening to music on YouTube, but it made me jump. And I clicked it off because I was like, I don't want to deal with this. And I refused to move my eyes from the road, as deer getting hit is common because it's the woods. Mm-hmm. In seconds after turning the radio off, I spotted something I could not explain. My brain knew there was something not right about what I was seeing. Before I could figure out what was wrong with this creature, it was running along the road. It darted into the road, leapt over the hood of my car, and bounded across the road to the other side of the median.
This is a parkour cryptid?
It was so close that if I had put my hand out of the window, I could have touched it. I had this awful feeling that made my heart race, and my need to escape kicked in so viscerally that without conscious thought, I pressed on the gas pedal and zoomed out of there. All the while, I could feel the hair on the back of my neck raised and that sense of being watched. And if you've been a hunter or anyone who has spent time in the woods, you know that feeling. It felt like I was being hunted. I now understand why my brain was having so much trouble understanding what I was seeing. I was sure it was a deer, but the legs were all wrong. Too long in the front compared to the back legs. And it didn't have fur, but it had a gray, leathery hide and a head that was even more wrong. It was not the head of a deer, but more like a dog. For the next hour, I was speeding, trying to get home. And more than once, I could see this creature just running inside the tree line at the same pace of my car.
No. Oh my God. What do you even do? This thing is like taunting you. How do you escape?
Just keep going.
You got to pray that thing just is, this is for its own game and it's not actually going to come for you because
it's working
obviously
out. It's exercising.
Yeah.
Once I got to my house, I didn't even turn my car off. I opened the door, ran inside, practically hysterical to my boyfriend that I had called during my frantic rush home. He was trying to talk me down from my panic. My boyfriend went outside and turned the car off for me. But even he felt that he was being watched while he was doing so. So he turned off the car and hurried inside.
I hate this because that means that it went off of the mountain road or the wooded road and like actually went into a residential area.
Yeah. I refused to drive that road after that if it got dark before heading home. And while I'd almost forgotten about that encounter, almost 3 months later, my boyfriend helped a friend move and they were driving that same road when late afternoon was setting in and it began to rain. My boyfriend flinched because the radio suddenly screeched and his friend asked in a very quiet voice, "What's that at the edge of the road?" My boyfriend slowed down and sure enough, he could see a creature just like I had described to him months earlier. Looked a lot like a deer, but front legs were far too long and the head was more like a dog. This time, it was looking at them, and my boyfriend said its eyes were glowing red.
This is a not deer.
Or a dogman. My boyfriend stopped the car after a time because no matter how fast he drove or how far it was, this thing was just keeping up with the car. My boyfriend's friend begged him not to stop. But my boyfriend insisted he was not going to keep having something stalking them without confronting it. So he tried to approach the creature.
Why the fuck would you do that? You've seen the speed of it.
But it took off into the woods. Thank goodness. However, there were soft prints in the muddy ground, and it was not hooves or paw pads, but looked more like 3 toes with claws. My boyfriend was dragged back to the car by his friend, and they drove away. Apparently, they've seen it a couple more times, always in the woods, just within sight, but not close enough to get a better look at. After he told me the story, I fully refused to ever go on that road again, and I really do my best to avoid it completely. Believe it or not, this is entirely up to you, but I will say there's definitely something in those forests and mountains here, and caution when traveling, as you never know what you might encounter. Misty.
Yeah, that is fucked up. That is really, really scary. It's terrifying no matter what if this thing is keeping pace with the car in the tree line. But what freaks me out is that we know from Misty that it has the ability to and the motivation to get so close to you that it's literally hopping over your car. So yeah, it doesn't just stay to the tree line. It can access you if it decides to. And it sounds like if it ever wants to, it will.
Yeah, we have no power.
This is the like Edward and Twilight, like, I can outrun you speech.
Yeah.
This
and
is
I can
the
kill
monologue.
You. Yeah. I can rip you
as if you could outrun me. That's what it is. That's what I was looking for.
But yeah, so beware of the Appalachias. Thank you for joining us for this 3-parter. There will be more because there's never enough episodes about Appalachia because there are so many encounters, so many cryptids, so many ghosts, so many legends, and so much lore. I love this.
Me too.
Happy camping season. Happy spring.
Yeah.
Get outside. Thank the cryptids.
Tell us what the trail is like.
Yeah. Make sure you respect the land.
Yeah. And if you encounter anything like this,
cry like the squonk.
Cry like the squonk.
That's all you can do.
Keep your eyes down. Pretend you didn't see anything. And then as soon as you're home, email us.
Yeah. Oh, email us at 2girlsoneghost@gmail.com. Also, if you want episodes 1 week early and ad-free, you can join us over on Patreon. It's $5 a month. You get every episode 1 week early and ad-free. You get a bonus episode every month. You can join us every Tuesday for campfire stories. You can join book club. You get stickers, holiday cards, so much more.
You can watch us on YouTube, follow us on social media. Shout out to our editor and producer, Jamie Ryan. And thank you to all of you. We love you so much.
So much.
And we will see you on the other side.
Very spooky.